What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to channel Musa Gamer, and today I want to talk to you about everything that you need to know about Joan of Arc Prime. And the reason why I talk to you about Joan of Arc Prime is because I just found out that I earned most amount of kills among all the other commanders in Rise of Kingdoms. Joan of Arc Prime got me the most amount of kills, and that is for a specific reason. For one, because she was actually the only kind of AoE field meta AoE cavalry fielder in Rise of Kingdoms until Arthur came into the game and then added the second option. And although she's not as strong as Arthur in terms of doing AoE skill damage, she was the #1 AoE skill damage commander in the game that was so powerful that having Nevsky Joan of Arc Prime beaten in a 1v1 duel, although Joan of Arc Prime is actually meant to just do AoE skill damage instead of doing well on the 1v1 scenario, was like the standard of is this new commander meta or not when you actually have new commanders like Zhuge Liang or Liu Che come out to the game. So Joan of Arc Prime was a really good commander and is still a very good commander. And I just want to talk to you about what she does, as well as what her history looks like, and also kind of compare to other AoE fielders that has been meta, and just see if she's still viable on the field as a meta commander. And also, I just want to also go over what might be the best build for Joan of Arc Prime, skill order, equipment and armaments suggestions for her, and then the best pairing for Joan of Arc Prime in terms of the best pairing suggestion, what kind of commander can you pair Joan of Arc Prime with, and so forth. So that's pretty much it. Let's just go ahead and jump right into the game and see how Joan of Arc Prime's skill set looks like. And as you can see in Joan of Arc Prime's, I don't know what this is, Codex. I have used Joan of Arc Prime a lot. I basically gold-headed her like right away as soon as I could get my hands on her. And you can see that I've gained 71 kills with Joan of Arc Prime alone. Now that is higher than any other commander that I have in Rise of Kingdoms. My recent love, Arthur, has only gotten 22 million kills. My Nevsky, who is not only part of just field, but also he used to be part of my rally stuff, only got 16 million kills, whereas Joan of Arc Prime has 71, almost 72 million kills, as you've seen earlier. So a very widely used commander. I personally use her the most among all the commanders, as I said. And here's why. Her first skill basically does 3 target AoE in a fan. Nothing too crazy. 2000 damage factor, 3 target AoE. Very simple. It does get reduced by the number of targets that you hit. And then the second part is actually what's really interesting though, is that for the next 3 seconds, up to 3 nearby allied or friendly troops, including this commander's troop, deals 5% more damage, which is whatever. Okay, 5% more damage is okay, but that's not the important part. And gain extra 20 rage per second for 3 seconds with up to 3 nearby allied troops. So what this says to me right now is basically whenever this commander uses an active skill, you activate practically a drum to all the commanders that are nearby to you, or three other commanders, two other commanders nearby, including yourself, which is actually really powerful because her active skill does fire off a lot more often than most of other commanders. And the fact that you get basically a drum trigger every single time that this gets triggered is what makes this skill pretty valuable. Now, her second skill is not really as overwhelming. It gives you 20% attack, it gives you 10% March speed, 20% if you're outside of the Alliance territory, and then it gives you a little bit more normal damage buff. Nothing too exciting compared to something like what Qin Shi Huang gets nowadays with like 50% of stats that is now attack. It's not really the strongest skill in the world, but it is a skill. It kind of elevates your damage output or stats output at the end of the day, so it is what it is. Let's just go ahead and move on to the third skill. Now, third skill is actually the least favorite skill of all cavalry mains, and because it only gives you 5% extra damage if you're using only cavalry, and then also at the same time it gives you 30% bonus normal damage though, which is good, but then again only for 1 second, and it has a massive cooldown of 5 seconds. So it basically boosts your next auto attack, which is not really something that you want to boost anyway. So this third skill really doesn't serve you really well, even if you can max this skill. So the reason why a lot of people actually prefers to have Joan of Arc Prime as 5515 is because of how underwhelming this skill is, and I don't blame them. The skill isn't really that strong. But yeah, the reason why we want to use Joan of Arc Prime, and we still use Joan of Arc Prime in June of 2025, is because of this skill right here, the Bless. Passive skill, if this commander is on the map, if this commander's troop is on the map, it gains 10% health, which is good. But the second part is actually the crazier part. Whenever their troops secondary commander uses an active skill, it has 100% chance to trigger this commander's Sacred Banner skill with cooldown of 10 seconds. Now, again, like what I said about her active skill giving you extra trigger of basically drum, every time you use this active skill, you get 60 rage up to 3 nearby enemy allies, so you get about 180 rage, right? And you actually trigger that twice. But then again, this cooldown of 10 seconds is what's kind of making her skill set a little bit weird, whereas this cooldown of 10 seconds actually doesn't allow you to trigger this skill every turn, every skill cycle, every 10-second skill cycle, but rather it only allows you to use this skill every other turn, every other skill cycle. Because whenever you use her active skill, the primary active skill, and then you'll use Joan of Arc Prime's active skill, and then you'll recast that Joan of Arc Prime's active skill at the end of your first skill cycle. But at that point, from that point to when you use her active skill again, it usually does take more than 10 turns or 10 seconds, for a matter of fact, that it actually doesn't allow you to trigger this skill every turn. This is kind of like a balancing method that Lilith has done so that Joan of Arc Prime doesn't get too much busted, because this commander is old. This commander is 3-4 years old now, and if she was able to trigger this every single skill cycle, that means that this commander basically has 4,000 damage factor skill back in like 2022, 2021 when she came out. It would have been absolutely broken. So they kind of limited that by actually putting that cooldown of 10 seconds in so that she doesn't fire it off every turn. But I'll actually showcase a little bit of trick that you can use for you to actually reuse this every skill cycle if possible. It's not going to work every time, but then again, if you do it on the field more often than not, knowing this trick will actually help you. Because I personally have, like when I cheeseburger or something, let's say with Foe and Joan of Arc Prime, or when I'm in the outer fight, I actually use this trick a lot, so that most of the time I actually do fire off this 4 skill every single skill cycle. So you can take a look at it, and if you find it interesting for yourself, then go ahead and use it. I will not take credit. And then the expertise skill, it gives you 5% more counterattack damage, and then it deals 5% more damage to troops that has more than 30% of units remaining. This is most likely like most of the time that you're fighting against an enemy troop, so just consider it 5% more damage for most of the time, and then 5% more counterattack damage. Not the best expertise in the world, I would say, but then again, better than not having it at all. All right, so with all of that said, let's just go ahead and take a look at what her skill set looks like. And let's just also talk about that trick that I just talked about when you're fighting on the murder ball. So when you attack a barbarian like this, it will actually use your active skill for 3 of the active skills with full primary skill activated, and then 2 times of the Joan of Arc Prime activated again, and it just generates rage so fast that you almost do skill damage non-stop to the enemy. And then as you can see, the second skill cycle, she only activated her Sacred Banner once because of that 10-second cooldown that I talked about. But then again, as soon as it gets to the next turn, so every other turn, you get to use Joan of Arc Prime's active skill 2 times. But when you actually look at it, 10-second cooldown is actually not that long. As a matter of fact, it's only by the time that you use your active skill in the second skill cycle with Joan of Arc Prime, the Sacred Banner, it actually only has like 2 seconds or so of cooldowns left when you're fighting the enemy. So what you can do when you're fighting against enemy is this is especially useful when you're actually fighting in outer fights, because you get to control what she does. You can micro use all her skills. You can basically fight the enemy, wait a couple seconds, and then do it again. Whereas and then I use both and then twice. I just use twice in every turn after waiting 2 seconds in between skill. So I go down to 2 seconds. Alright, so skill number 1. Boom. Joan number 1, Joan number 2. Then boom. Move around a little bit, run away enemies to the air, and then Joan number 1, Joan number 2. Boom. Joan number 1. Oh, actually, not pursuing. Boom. Joan number 1, Joan number 2. Boom. Wait 4 seconds. So you actually have Joan number 1, power so let's try it. This is kind of embarrassing. I'm missing this a lot. Again. Proactive skill. Firing off for the first time. This will guarantee 3 active skill cycle. Joan number prime 1, 2, and then wait a little bit. You can have Poe activate his skill, run away a little bit, and then use Joan number prime number 1, number 2. So yeah, I mean, it may not look like a lot because you might prefer just standing still and doing extra damage, but I think this is very useful when you're doing turf fight, and then you can micromanage the rage and stuff. So I mean, try it out. If I taught you something that you didn't know before, then I think it will be really helpful. I'm glad that I made this video for you. But then again, if you already knew this, then my apologies. Hopefully this helps out those who didn't know about this. All right, now let's go ahead and jump right back into the PowerPoint and then talk about the rest of the kit that I prepared for you. The history of Joan of Arc Prime. So Joan of Arc Prime is a very old commander, and as you can see, he was released after Alexander Nevsky, Scipio Prime, Boudica Prime, and then right before Sargon. Now, you might think, oh, Sargon is a pretty recent commander, but then again, when I first started the game back in, I think, 2022, or like 1,000 days ago, 1,100 days ago, which is like a year, 3 years and a half at this point, Joan of Arc Prime was one of the most recent additions to the game. And then Sargon came out after I started the game. So yeah, Joan of Arc Prime is like 3.5 years old. And that is pretty old, I would say. And also at the same time, look at the lineups that we have here, right? We have Xiang Yu. I mean, Scipio Prime is still used, right? But then again, all the other commanders, like Alexander Nevsky was like the goated commander back then. But if you compare Joan of Arc Prime to, let's say, someone like Boudica Prime, right? Obviously, Joan of Arc Prime was really, really strong, and she was way stronger than all the other commanders that was released before her. So when Joan of Arc Prime did come to the game, it was kind of really, really strong, and it was kind of game-breaking commander of her own because of the fact that she did use her active skill twice in an AoE fashion, and the fact that damage factor 2,000 in 3 target AoE for twice in a row, every other turn, just was really busted kind of skill mechanism at that point. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what Joan of Arc Prime does and compare it to all the other commanders that are meta AoE commanders, along with YSG, just because YSG is comparable. What you can notice from her kit though, she only has 5% damage amplifier. So, but then again, her total damage output is almost as strong as someone who has 62% damage factor, which is YSG. And then let's say if Zhuge Liang did not have 30% extra skill damage, then Joan of Arc Prime would have actually dealt about the same, if not better damage than Zhuge Liang. So Joan of Arc Prime is only missing amplifier, but then again, her damage output is indeed lower than all the other meta commanders that was released in the last year or so. So Joan of Arc Prime is strong, but then again, when compared to like all those crazy new next level commanders that we've seen lately, she's only, I think, better than YSG still, just because of the fact that you can get a lot of skill damage from Nevsky and Ho and all the other commanders that you can use in Joan of Arc Prime, so that this damage factor can be uplifted a lot. But then again, when you compare her to Baichi, Liu Qie, Zhuge Liang, Arthur, Chen, it's just not really on par with that, like those like crazy meta commanders that was released either this year or last year or last 2 years. In terms of what you can pair Joan of Arc Prime with though, you can also use Joan of Arc Prime as a primary commander, and when you're doing that, the best recommended commander for Joan of Arc Prime and then the secondary commander is actually Belisarius Prime. Belisarius Prime, I know that a lot of people don't have him just because of the fact that he's not really, he doesn't really do AoE damage. He's specialized in one specific thing, which is actually swarming something. But if you want to use Joan of Arc Prime as a primary commander, you can actually use Joan of Arc Prime as primary and then use Belisarius Prime as secondary. But when you're using Joan of Arc Prime as secondary commander, though, you can use her with Nevsky or Ho, and both of those commanders actually buffs Joan of Arc Prime's damage by almost 60%. I think both of them has about 60% skill damage buff amplification. And again, without any skill damage amplification that all the other commanders in this list has, Joan of Arc Prime dealt like more than what YSG did, right? So if you can get 60% extra damage on this could easily become 10,000 damage factor, right? So having Nevsky or Po tubing actually paired up with Joan of Arc Prime really amplifies the total damage output that Marsh does as a whole. So having Nevsky and Huo for that reason to amplify as much damage as possible of what Joan of Arc Prime is supposed to do is really going to benefit that pairing as well. And in some special KVKs, such as I think Siege of the Orleans, you can use Joan of Arc Prime as primary and then use Arthur as a secondary to do maximum amount of AoE. But because of what their pair does, I'll go over in a bit, but then again, because of what their pair does, you do need a lot of auxiliary skills attached to them to make sure that ultimate combo of AoE on the field does perform better than having them split among, let's say, Ho Arthur and then Nevsky Joan. Now let's just talk about the Joan of Arc Prime with Belisarius Prime, right? I do recommend that you use Wedge for this. And the pros of this combo is actually that this has a lot of anti-rage mechanism with Belisarius Prime. And also at the same time, it does buff the swarm damage with Belisarius Prime's expertise skill. And so what this pair does as a whole, Joan of Arc Prime's active skill basically buffs your own rage, whereas you use Belisarius Prime, and then Belisarius Prime increases the rage that you need to generate for you to use your active skill to the enemy, and also at the same time drain some of the rage, not drain actually, reduce the rage that the target is actually taking. So it kind of silences the target while you're gaining more rage. So it kind of gives you that unfair rage advantage and disadvantage to the enemy as well. So this is a viable option. A lot of people do use this pair if you have invested in Belisarius Prime. If you didn't, it's fine. You can use Joan of Arc Prime in all the other different places, so yeah, it's fine. The con of this pairing, though, is that it does have slower skill cycle than Huo Chubing, because Huo has, I think, if you didn't fight for 15 seconds, it does have 150 rage reduction from Huo Chubing, which allows Joan of Arc Prime's active skill to go off faster, too. And then it does have lower skill damage than Huo or Nevsky. Again, Belisarius Prime does have skill damage amplification, but then again, not as much as Huo or Nevsky at the end of the day. So if you want to maximize the damage output of the AoE commander that Joan of Arc Prime is, maybe using with Nevsky or Joan of Arc Prime is actually the better idea. Now, I've actually not fixed this, just disregard this part, but then again, Huo, Joan of Arc Prime is one of the favorite combos that people use ever since Arthur came out, and then those people who are using Arthur as combo damage commander, and then you still need that one skill damage combo of cavalry, just because it has a lot of advantage when you fire off the skill cycle just endlessly, as you saw from the barb test that I showed you earlier, right? And you do need to use Wedge, and in Huo, Joan of Arc Prime combo, and this is as I show here, this is actually the most recommended pairing that I do recommend for you, is because you can actually use fast rage. Again, that Huo having less rage reduction, less rage requirement for the first couple of skill cycle, and having Huo slow with his active skill. Huo has, I think, 40% slow on his active skill, guarantees that 3 skill AoE hit with Joan of Arc Prime's AoEs hitting right after Huo active skill. So the fact that they can rage faster and then slowing the enemy basically guarantees the 3 skill damage factor hit with full Joan of Arc Prime pairing. So that's why this pairing is so good. But if you're using full Joan of Arc Prime, you do need to give up full Arthur pair, which is actually the most DPS, the highest DPS pairing that you can possibly bring out as cavalry mate. So there is a little bit of trade-off there. But then again, more often than not, people are already building Delta formation just because of the fact that, Arthur's going to have his new pairing in 4 to 5 months from now. And just getting ready for that in terms of armaments, and then, not letting that armaments go to waste. You usually use Arthur with Philip or Bertrand or William to be used as combo damage commander. So more often than not, you do see a lot of Joan of Arc Prime running around the field just because of that reason too. You can also consider using Nevsky and Joan of Arc Prime combo, which has a great balance of tankiness, damage, and defense reduction Nevsky's active skill, which only has 23 damage factor, which is lower than Huo's damage factor. But then again, also has defense reduction built into it. So when Joan of Arc Prime does fire off her active skill, that damage will be amplified further because of that damage reduction, defense reduction that Nevsky has done. But then again, it does have that disadvantage of having slower skill cycle than Huo, Joan of Arc Prime, just because Nevsky does not have that rage reduction for his kit. Now, there is this last combo that I do want to recommend if you're in some certain special KVKs that you can actually bring in a lot of auxiliary skills. It's simple. Joan of Arc Prime with Arthur. Just 2 massive AoE dealing combo that you can possibly bring out for cavalry mains. And this has really clear advantage, which is massive double AoE with highest DPS potential on the field. You're doing Joan of Arc Prime's active skill, Arthur's active skill, which is 2800 damage factor, skill damage factor, and then another 2000 damage factor from Joan of Arc Prime. Just having that cycle one after another, after another, after another, it's just going to be crazy, crazy AoE damage that you can do on the field. But then again, it does miss a lot of skill damage buff. Arthur provides you 30%, but then again, that's not as high as, let's say, something like Huo or Nevsky provides for both of them. So skill damage buffs are missing, and it does take away Joan of Arc Prime or Arthur from Huo and Nevsky. So Huo and Nevsky would actually not have a job for that matter. So that is a clear disadvantage that you can actually consider when you're considering using this kit, this pair. However, if auxiliary skills are available to fill more skill damage, for example, you can use Huo and Nevsky's skill kind of slapped onto either to this pairing itself. You can basically build the ultimate cavalry AoE pair that you can possibly make in Rise of Kingdoms, and that Joan of Arc Prime and Arthur pairing as skill damage commander, I've seen some of the craziest reports with that pairing on the field in the Siege of New Orleans. That KVK that Joan of Arc Prime is actually featured in. So that, yeah, if you are thinking about using this, just make sure that you have enough auxiliary skills to make sure that they get the missing skill damage, and also at the same time, you can slap on the skill of Huo and Nevsky to make that ultimate cavalry AoE beast. And in conclusion, there's a couple pros of Joan of Arc Prime and then a couple cons of Joan of Arc Prime. The one pro is that it does massive double cast AoE, which is crazy, and it also is a versatility. It also provides versatility for as AoE nuker for cavalry. So if you wanted to, let's say, use Arthur as combo damage commander, then you can use Joan of Arc Prime with Huo and then just still be absolutely beasting on the field. Whereas if you wanted to, let's say, use Huo and Arthur combo, we can still use Joan of Arc Prime behind Nevsky and still do massive damage. And then also at the same time, that AoE rage buff is just very unique and is going to benefit your murder ball much more so than you might think. However, it does have some cons. It is missing a lot of damage buff. It is missing a lot of skill damage buff, so you are kind of forced to pair her up with massive skill damage buffing commander. And also at the same time, the amount of stats that you gain from her kit, 20% attack, 10% health only, is leaving her very, very squishy just because you don't get that much health from her kit. So again, pairing her with Nevsky would solve this problem. Pairing her with other tanky commanders would just solve the problem. But yeah, so that's basically the cons of Joan of Arc Prime. Alright, so I hope you guys actually enjoyed this video. If you guys did, please go ahead and drop a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I'll see y'all in the next video. Alright, peace!